Today in China, the conversation around animal protection is a contentious topic. As China combats environmental degradation across the country, animals have risen to the forefront of the debate. In this video, we will highlight what is being done in China to protect some of the most vulnerable living creatures. China is home to nearly 6,347 species of vertebrates, making it the fourth most biodiverse country in the world. Many of these species are endemic, including the giant panda, the South China tiger, the golden-haired monkey, and the Chinese alligator. Unfortunately, most of these animals are endangered. In fact, according to the latest official Chinese statistic, 44% of all wildlife in the country is endangered. According to the National Humane Education Society, wildlife conservation is defined as the practice of protecting animal species and their habitats. It is achieved partially through legislation such as the Endangered Species Act, the establishment and protection of public lands, and responsible public practices that conserve wild animal populations. One of the greatest threats to wildlife in China is the rapid urbanization of previously rural areas, which has occurred in recent decades. As a consequence of this rapid urbanization, many natural ecosystems have been destroyed due to deforestation. As a consequence of this, so have wildlife habitats. Population growth is one of the main contemporary causes of deforestation. Population increases directly lead to increased demand for land resources. Other ways deforestation occurs in the contemporary context is through industrial logging and converting forests into agricultural land. This can be tied into the demand for food and wood created by affluent middle-class Chinese. Another threat to animal protection is poaching. For example, the poaching of elephants for their ivory has proven to be a disastrous practice for wildlife in China. According to scholars at China's Ministry of Education, the proportion of illegal killing of elephants was positively correlated to increases in China's household consumption. In China, ivory has historically been used for medicinal purposes, but recently it has been used to make lucrative items like jewelry and ornaments for the wealthy. These items can be expensive, therefore inaccessible to low-income populations. Essentially, only the wealthy are benefiting from the ivory trade, and since wealthy populations in China yield the power, they allow these problems to continue. In recent years, there has been conflicting laws created that have both supported and denounced the ivory trade. For example, in 2006, China instituted a legal ivory trade following the designation of items made from ivory as being part of the Chinese intangible culture. This resulted in the expansion of the illegal ivory trade. However, in January 2018, China completely banned its legal ivory trade. Since this ban made the killing of elephants inside of China illegal, individuals began to invest in the illegal poaching of elephants in Africa. Essentially, the harm has been exported onto African elephants that are slaughtered and then exported to Hong Kong and then distributed throughout China. In recent months, President Xi Jinping has said he is committed to ending the illegal ivory trade. He is not alone in this commitment. Hong Kong lawmaker Elizabeth Quaid has been instrumental in promoting the Ivory Free campaign initiated by Wild Aid, an international NGO that advocates for reducing the demand for wildlife products. Ultimately, the power to determine what happens to China's wildlife depends largely on Chinese people. This power resides within the government, NGOs, civil society, and businesses. Government responses to wildlife protection is vital to their preservation. These responses have been primarily through legislation such as the Protection of Wildlife Law of 1988, which outlines that there be strengthened protection of wildlife resources by the state, and civil society assigns penalties for those who go against these efforts. The state institutions responsible for enforcing this law include the State Council, the Ministry of Ecology and Environment, and the State Forestry Administration. Having become a major player in the global economy, the Chinese government cares about how it is perceived on the world stage. In the past 40 years, the country has signed on to numerous wildlife protection agreements, one of the most important of which being CITES, the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species, which China joined in 1980. Aside from national and provincial institutions, there are currently no local institutions responsible for implementing the national and international policies that have been created. This lack of coordination between the different levels of government in China has proved to be an obstacle to the success of governmental efforts to improve wildlife protection. While the government has made some strides to enforce wildlife protection legislation, some businesses in China have perpetuated the exploitation of wildlife and their habitats. One of the ways in which businesses have continued the degradation of wildlife is by continuing the business of wildlife farming. Wildlife farming is the act of raising wild animals in contained spaces in order to extract materials from them. Although there is only estimated to be 27 South Asian tigers left in the world, there are more than 6,000 living in captivity on Chinese farms. Another stakeholder in wildlife protection is civil society. Civil society is the space in society that the individual or family occupies. In regards to wildlife protection, the most popular civil society responses are protests and grassroots campaigns, most of which is done by children. For example, in 2012, then 14-year-old Celia Ho of Hong Kong created a campaign to end the ivory trade that began with her letter to the South China Morning Post pleading for an end to the senseless killing of elephants for their tusks. Celia has written many letters to sites explaining the severe implications caused by the hunting of the elephant and has even tried to get Yao Ming involved in hopes of spreading her message. Celia Ho's efforts to get celebrities like Yao Ming involved in her campaign is a perfect example of how celebrities garner more power and privilege than the average citizen because they have a voice that will be heard and taken more seriously. Ironically, due to his position in society, Yao Ming is less likely to suffer the consequences from illegal wildlife trading. But since he is famous, more people will listen to him than they would an ordinary citizen. Another animal that has garnered a great deal of support from civil society is the Tibetan antelope. Once boasting a population of over 1 million in the early 20th century, the Tibetan antelope population has since dwindled to around 70,000. This drastic reduction is the result of overhunting due to the lucrative nature of their fur. To combat this overhunting, ordinary Chinese citizens created the film King of the Tibetan Antelope, which seeks to promote the conservation of the species through an art form that is accessible to a larger population. In addition to government and citizenry efforts, international and domestic NGOs play a major role in the promotion of policies that ensure the livelihood of wildlife in China. One of the ways that NGOs try to do this is through education and spreading awareness about the status of wildlife. For example, in 2012, a Hong Kong chapter of the Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, or SPCA, donated over 13,000 books to primary and middle school students in Xiamen, which resulted in 35,000 children receiving animal protection-based curriculum. Another way that NGOs get involved is by using their guanxi, or social networks, in order to pass regulations that protect wildlife. An example of this is the Hong Kong-based NGO Animals Asia Foundation, which has been extremely successful in setting strict regulations against bear bile farming, a practice that consists of locking a bear in a cage with an open stomach wound, periodically extracting their bile for medicinal purposes. Although the work being done by NGOs in China is remarkable, it is not easy because they often face pushback from the government. International NGOs can often meet their goals quicker compared to domestic NGOs because they yield more influence and wealth along with an advanced guanxi network. There are multiple reasons that China is facing the severe wildlife crisis that it is today. The long and complicated history of deforestation has led to places that many wild animals once known to be home being destroyed or fragmented. The rapid urbanization that has taken place in the modern era of China has propelled the issues that negatively impact wildlife species to new heights. While efforts are being made to protect wildlife on numerous fronts, animal species continue to become endangered both within and outside of China. Ultimately, wildlife in China will continue to suffer endangerment unless considerable attention is given to the matter of conservation. Without it, animals like the South China tiger, the snub-nosed monkey, and the giant panda may soon only exist in the history books of future generations.